you live in New York City, and for some reason, raising children in New York City is so romanticized in my mind, but I'm imagining that it is also very difficult. What is your experience?
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, it's kind of both of those things. It is in many ways as magical as you might think. Like we spend our afternoons at the park, not in our backyard, because the park is our
Exactly.
backyard. And, we take our kids to restaurants and there's endless museums and, um, our friends are our neighbors, some of whom live in our building, not in the, down the cul-de-sac. So in that way, it is like kind of as romantic, I guess, as you might think. But it is also very challenging, like getting around. We don't really leave our neighborhood very often with the kids because car seats are a pain. Like everyone's like, oh, there's Uber car seat, but not really. Like it takes forever to get
Right.
one. You don't want to be like lugging a car seat around a park. So if it's not walkable, it's like a big commitment. And we do not own a car. A lot of people do, but we don't. It doesn't really make sense for us. We take the subway all the time when we do leave our little nook. So yeah, there's definitely like the fun parts and the hard parts.
And
Yeah,
you have three children. I mean,
yeah.
let's not forget about that.
We have three. So we have a 4-year-old Max, a 2-year-old Bella, and then a 3-month-old, almost 3-month-old Hirsch. So yeah, we're real, and they're all really close in age. And oh, that's the other thing. We live in an apartment. I grew up in a suburb of Indianapolis, so like I grew up in a house. As my husband grew up outside Chicago, so he grew up in a house with a yard. And yeah, it's kind of crazy that we all live in this apartment together. It's tight quarters, but it's fun.
Well, let's talk about that and where you grew up. What's your heritage and where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
I was born in Minneapolis and was raised in Indianapolis. We moved when I was like a year old. I ended up actually working in Minneapolis and Indianapolis in news. So people that hear my story are like, never know which one it is. But my hometown is definitely Indianapolis. That's what I consider my hometown. And I'm actually excited. I'm working on planning our 20-year high school reunion right now. I'm
Oh
really
my gosh.
so yeah, I grew up there. I'm the youngest of three. I have an older brother and sister. My parents were both physicians. My dad was a surgeon, and my mom a pediatrician, a specialized pediatrician. She now lives in Michigan. But yeah, I grew up in a home where education was the most important thing. Getting good grades was probably the most important thing to my parents, and being a good person, obviously. But getting good grades, and I think achieving success in whatever that looks like for you personally. So for me, it was kind of I always kind of wanted to be a journalist. My sister is a lawyer. My brother is an artist and architect. So none of us went into medicine, but yeah, just a very education focused family. We are true to our Jewish roots. We carry that faith deep within our family. I would say it's less of a God-based and more of like a spiritual and cultural and tradition-based for our family. But that's something I carry on with my own kids. But yeah, Midwestern, I went to a public high school, and then I went to a big, giant public high school, and then I went to Northwestern for college. And yeah, I had a really lovely childhood. I mean, when I look back, my parents both worked, and so that's kind of been inspiration for me to continue working as I raise kids myself.
I'm from Michigan. What's up?
Oh, nice.
What's that?
Where in Michigan?
Sterling Heights, so it's a suburb outside Detroit.
Oh, my mom lives in Rochester Hills now.
We're like
Is that close?
neighbors. Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah.
You said that your parents were focused on a very educated background, a very educated upbringing. I have to wonder, were your parents supportive of you wanting to go into journalism in particular?
Yeah, they were. I think because I expressed it from such a young age, it was actually my high school dance coach who pointed this out, that journalism was sort of like the perfect, TV journalism specifically was kind of the perfect meld of everything I was. So I have to preface this with like, I was the captain of my dance team in high school. I am not a good dancer, and I was never the best dancer, but I was a good leader, and I showed up for practice, and I cared a lot. So that was like one of my crowning achievements in high school. And then I was also the editor of my yearbook. And so it wasn't until years later that I went back to visit, and my dance coach was like, it's just funny because broadcast journalism just kind of encompasses everything you are, because you do have this like love for performance, which there is an element of that in TV news. I know we kind of like to deny it, but we still have to wear makeup. We have to be confident in front of people, good at memorizing, that kind of thing. And journalism, which was yearbook. So I think my parents saw that, especially compared to my siblings, I always was like really liked to be in front of people. And I think they thought it was the right career for me, and that I loved to write, but I also loved this kind of like element of TV that's not glamorous, but seems maybe glamorous to other people, as you know.
That's so funny you say that, because I'm a former dancer too, and I was on my high school dance team,
Oh my
and I was
gosh.
a co-captain, but I was definitely not the best one on the team either.
Oh my God,
But I
see?
had those leadership skills, so I wonder if there's something to that.
Yeah, yeah. It's like a lot of journalists who I'm sure you've met over the years were like in pageant um, or theater. I feel, or debate team. Like I feel like you really do have to want to be in front of people to do on-air work, and that can start as young as like literally doing ballet when you're 5 years old.
Exactly. I talked to other journalists, and I was always a performer, always grew up performing, went to a theater high school, but I'm also very introverted, which is so interesting. And I've talked to a lot of introverted journalists, and I think because we've talked about this, we've discussed it at length, but maybe because we're good listeners and we still have
Yeah.
those leadership skills and everything, but the whole thing is so funny.
Yeah, I'm an introvert too, actually, and I think my whole life, I'm kind of a mix, but I always just thought I was an extrovert. And my mom recently told me, she was like, I always thought in high school, like you thought you were this extrovert, but I always saw this piece of you that was introverted. And now as like an adult, I'm realizing how important that alone time is to me, that I never really gave myself when I was younger. And now I know, like if I don't get that, I'm not a good mom, I'm not a good wife, I'm not good at work. I need that to kind of fill my cup.
Makes so much sense. So, speaking of your career, so you knew that you wanted to do this, and right when you graduated high school, did you go to school for journalism then?
Yeah, so I actually, my dream really originally was like I wanted to be the editor of Vogue. That was like my young woman dream. Then I went at Northwestern. I just exploring. I took like a extracurricular thing, like it was like our news station at Northwestern, the Northwestern News Network, and I just did it like to try it out. I was like, this is kind of fun. Like I did feel that like performer in me kind of coming out. That's how I ended up doing TV. And then I had a professor so most of my friends wanted these like internships in like New York or LA, that kind of thing, where they were like shadowing a reporter at like a big station. And I had this one professor who said to me, why don't you, instead of doing that, go be an intern in like a really small market, because there you could actually be on TV. And I was like, that's crazy. I don't know how to be on TV. He's like, well, no one cares. You're going to be in this like tiny market where they're going to be training a bunch of people who are maybe a year older than you anyway. Just go do it. Because I was a junior. So I went to Billings, Montana that summer, which our school had an internship like relationship with. It was like market, I don't even remember, a low market. And I was on TV the whole summer. And it was
What
like
great advice.
yeah. It was really good advice. And I try to share that because I think especially now, young journalists see younger and younger people going higher and higher right out of school. I learned so much that summer and in my subsequent jobs in smaller markets. Like that experience and messing up in a smaller setting was the best way to learn.
Yeah, and getting there so early, because instead of waiting until you graduated from college, you said, why don't I use my internship and go right away to that small market and start on air right away?
Exactly. In fact, I'd had an internship lined up in New York and I turned it down. I like called them and I was like, I'm really sorry about this. And it was such a good choice because I was on air. I messed up so many times on air. I had my first live shot, and I didn't even really know what I was doing at all. But you power through it, and it's a much more forgiving place to make your mistakes, because obviously I've made mistakes since in later bigger markets, but like you don't beat yourself up as much over it when you're somewhere smaller.
Right. And once you get to the big market, you can't make the same mistakes that you made
Exactly.
when you made in that small market. So that small market is really important to just be
Hmm.
able to make those mistakes there. And plus, you don't want to see what you were like back
Yeah,
then in a big market. Like if you
yeah,
really think about it, like later on, you're like, oh,
so
I'm so
true.
glad I was there and did it then.
True. It's so true. And I think the viewers are forgiving. I think in the time I didn't understand that. I was like, oh my gosh, I messed up. Everyone's going to see it and judge me. But I would get emails that were like, hey, like, you're doing a great job. I know you're new to this. You're doing a great job. And I was like, wow, that's like really nice, because these people live in these communities. They know that they're not, a lot of the reporters who come there are going to be 22, 23. And so I found it, I also learned just a lot about local government in these smaller markets, who to call, how to make contacts. I just don't know how you jump into New York City without that experience and know who to call when there's a fire.
Absolutely. So let's talk about your career trajectory. Where did you go from your internship? How long did it take you to get your first official job in local news? How did that happen?
So that summer, I did this job in Billings, Montana. That fall, I did a credited internship. So, like, I got school credit. It was a required internship through my school. I did at in Topeka, Kansas, which was a similar type market, but I learned so much there. And I remember, covering, like, it was a young man who had drowned. It was like my first real tragedy that I'd covered, and I learned there, more of the storytelling piece of things, which as a real human, when you do it in college, even at, like, I thought Medill at Northwestern was an amazing school, but it's still different than actually covering, a real tragedy. So I did 3 months in, or 2 or 3 months in Topeka. And then after I graduated, my first official job was at KVOA in Tucson, Arizona.
Where we both worked at different times, I should add.
Yes, yes, I loved that job. I went there not really knowing I was going to be on mornings, but gosh, mornings was where you learned. I mean, that was like, I learned so much, and I'm actually still in touch with like a good number of people, including Angelique, who connected us from that position. Because, as you know, you make really close friends in those markets too, which was kind of fun. So I spent 2 years there, almost 2 years there. And then I got a job in Minneapolis. I did 3 years at the ABC affiliate in Minneapolis. And I think it was three. Oh my gosh, 2 or 3. Mom brain, sorry. And then I got a job in Indianapolis, my hometown, where I anchored the weekend morning newscast, which was my favorite job that I've had. I love weekend mornings. There's so much freedom. It's a long show. I was a solo anchor, and so I was like the producer of the show. I mean, I had amazing producers, but I felt like a producer too. Um, so I did that job for 2 or 3 years, and then I actually went back to Minneapolis to anchor an evening newscast there at the Fox affiliate. And that was a 3-year contract, and about halfway in, I met my husband, who lived in New York.
How did you
So
meet him?
we met online on a dating app called The League, which I don't know if it's still around. I don't know if it's still like as like popular as it was when we met almost 7 years ago. But after I met him, I had some big decisions to make, and because the job I had in Minneapolis was kind of like my dream job. I was an evening anchor, but it was actually like a mid-evening. My show was like 6 to 7:30, and so I still had like a life, because I've always struggled with
The
the
dream. Yeah.
shift. Yeah. Like, I don't do well. That 2 to 10 p.m. shift is like not for me. I'm a morning person, so I would just wake up and be anxious about work whenever I did that. So I loved this shift that I was on. I mean, I had a great job. Um, that said, I wanted to get married. I wanted to have a family. And I was really feeling like Minneapolis being there a second time, I didn't know that I was going to meet my person there. And so I kind of started branching out. I changed my dating apps to say I lived in New York. I lied. I mean, I was going there on vacation, so that's why I did it. But my husband was the first person that I matched with when I changed my location to New York. So in our messages, I told him, I'm like, just so you know, I don't actually live in New York. And he was like, this is weird. But we agreed to meet up anyway, and the rest is history.
I'm so happy you say that because so many young women are bouncing around, going across the country to so many different markets. And it's hard to learn to prioritize or when to prioritize having a relationship, having children, having friendships. Like it can be really, really taxing for that woman that is constantly going to a new market, learning people all over again, and then learning when is it time to then say, okay, I'm going to follow the relationship versus maybe the job climb,
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up because I think, gosh, when you grow up like how I did, my mom was a doctor and a hospital administrator and is now a university president. She still works a lot. I always thought it was career first. That's just kind of what I thought. Even though my mom had 3 children, I just had this mentality of like job first. Like I'm in this, I'm waking up at 1 a.m. to go to work. I'm working in cold, rain, snow. It was heat in Tucson, wherever it is. I went from Tucson to Minneapolis, so both ends of the spectrum. And I did make decisions earlier in my career that were career. I chose my career over relationships. And I do think at the time they were the right decisions because I was young and I wasn't ready to slow down and choose a man at that moment in my life. So I wouldn't take that back. That said, when the same kind of decision came up 10 years later, almost 10 years later, I also feel like I made the right decision, which was to choose a man. Or a spouse or a partner or whatever it is. Because I really knew at that point I was ready to settle down and the career that I'd already built could follow me. When I was 22, 23, I had nothing to stand on. So if I had moved for a man then, how would I have necessarily gotten the job I wanted? I had no experience. I had like one job behind me. When I moved to New York, I had this whole career. And I thought, something will happen. I will find something that works for me in New York. I don't know, is it going to necessarily be the job I'm dreaming of today? Is it going to be a replacement for this amazing evening anchor job I'm doing in Minneapolis? Like, probably not. But I'm okay with that. And the way it all worked just kind of fell into the right places. I ended up doing 6 months without work, which was kind of what I needed. As you know, you get a little burnt out working morning shifts and not going to friends' weddings, missing baby showers, missing bachelorette parties, missing Christmases and Thanksgivings, Hanukkahs, whatever it looks like for you. At a point, you're like, I can't do this forever. And I needed that step out of news, of my soul, giving my soul to my career, to realize how I wanted to re-enter. And that's when freelance appeared for me in New York. And it's gone through everything from 7 days a week to right now I'm working 2 days a week. And there are benefits in every stage of that. And if I want to work more, I will pitch more. And if I'm not available, I'm able to say I'm not available. But that's only because of what I brought to this opportunity, which I could do because I was older,
Yeah, and we don't need to feel guilty about it. We don't need that lifetime subscription to things that no longer serve us.
Exactly. That is so spot on. How many things have I done that didn't serve me because I thought it was like the right path or what someone had told me in advice one time? You have to kind of trust your gut. And again, you don't know your gut really until you've experienced things.
So when did CBS News call?
So that was through, I actually had an agent change. I didn't work with an agent for a very long time, and I think when younger reporters ask me if they need one, my general thought is no. I really don't think you need one, and I think they can be helpful, but again, I think you can do it on your own if you're really proactive and get out there and make the contacts.
I'll add too that I had an agent, and generally I think you don't need one unless you're going to network
Yes.
as you are.
Yes. So I will say that most of the people I work with, I think all the people I work with have an agent, and many of us work with the same few agencies. I think, I think once you kind of make the decision that you're interested in going network or being in New York or probably LA, it's probably time to start considering one. And my agent had reached out to me about freelance. It was like the week before my wedding, truly. And I was like, I was so excited. I really couldn't believe that this was happening because it just felt like, oh, I finally met the man. I finally got the job, like I'm finally getting married. Because I didn't meet my husband until I was 31. And I really had put off relationships for such a long time that it kind of felt like everything was sort of falling into place for me in the right way. And I was just so thrilled. I remember like that first shift I did what we call med day, which is literally like the 3 top medical stories of the day. It's like low level, it's like a C block thing that stations run. It's important, but it's not like any investigative anything like that. It's just you put together a couple of VOs and you voice them. I wasn't on air or nothing. And I actually had decided that I was getting married literally the next week, and I had decided to use my new name because I was like, this is like a shifting point in my career. And from then on, I was Naomi Ruchim, and it was so fun because I got to send it to like my new family, and they saw their name, and like it was just really a special, like the whole thing just kind of felt out of this world.
It's funny you say that because when I switched stations, I was engaged. So I went with my new name while I was engaged and not married yet. We were engaged for a year. And I remember my news director saying, but what if it doesn't work out? I'm like, it's going to work out. We've been together 9 years now. Oh, it's going to work out. I promise you.
And that's the time to do it, right? Like to change your name. Because otherwise it's kind of like people
jarring.
Back and people are like, oh, not that there's anything wrong with that. Like if people do that, that's great. But like, yeah, that's amazing that you had that same kind of transitionary moment where you could kind of go either way.
Yeah, exactly. So what was your first day like at CBS News?
So my first day was like kind of like any first job. Like, again, I'm freelance, which means basically that they offer me days and I can say yes or no. And by the way, the first 2 years I said yes to every single one. So I think that's why I'm still there, frankly, amid, cuts and whatever. I've actually never considered full-time there because I have 3 kids. I just can't. But it's been, again, this like perfect opportunity. But the first day, so, you come in, you're in the lobby, you still don't really believe this is really happening. You get your photo taken, all of that. And I thought, maybe I would just sit around because that's often how first days are. Although in news, as you know, they often, if something happens.
Yeah, they're often not. In fact, they'll probably load you with 2 stories that day because they have that extra body. But go on.
Oh, this girl's here. Why not? But yeah, my first day, I basically just did this medical report. And it was just a really nice, like, ease into things. I don't think I worked then until after my wedding because I think my first day of work was Monday and I got married that weekend in Florida. So like we left like Thursday or something. Then I came back and my first multiple shifts were what was called, which has now gone away, called Money Watch. So you were at the stock exchange and it's a morning shift. So I basically trained for like 3 or 4 days on that because it's multiple hits. It's like at the time it was multiple. It was the most hits you had of any position at NewsPath, where the department I worked for. It was like 18 hits in a shift. And there were so many anchors you worked with. So like for people who don't know exactly how NewsPath or Money Watch was, you basically are the network affiliate. So like I would be on all the CBS stations. So like their producers would contact my producer, and then we would line up like which times they wanted me and on which stories. So Money Watch was really eye-opening for me because it was at the time it was at the stock exchange, and I know nothing about finance, and so I had to learn very quickly. Thankfully, my husband works in finance, so I leaned on him for a lot. And I had an amazing producer who I worked with. And again, it was like a fill-in basis. So the woman that was training me, Diane King Hall, I mean, she's just like, there's no one better at this job than her. And so she taught me like everything I know. So there were a couple hard days of training, and then I worked the holidays. And I like missed my husband's family trip that year. I think I went late. Yeah, I went late to be able to work. And yeah, I you still have to put in your dues. I also tell people that too. Like, don't be arrogant, no matter what you're walking into. And obviously, CBS, I'm like low man on the totem pole. But like, even if you think you're like too important for a job, you still are expected from your coworkers and your boss to like put in the time. Like, respect yourself, but like you need to say yes. You need to like work hard and prove, especially to coworkers, that you're not trying to like Bigfoot anyone. That's my personal view.
Is there a story you've done that just stands out to you?
When I think about like my entire career, I think about the shooting in Tucson is definitely the most career shifting, mind shifting, emotional, everything that I've ever covered.
Were you on the scene for that?
Yeah, so I was there. It had been so it was January. I had been at KVOA for a little over a year.
And we're talking about the shooting of Gabby Giffords.
I had actually okay, long story short, my dad passed away in a car accident in December of 2010.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. I was 23, living away from home, living in Tucson. And it was a Sunday night, so I was supposed to work that Monday morning. And my mom, who knew I worked crazy hours, called me. And like, whenever I worked that shift, I never really slept that well. I still don't when I work that shift, which I still work. But I would constantly like wake up in the middle of the night and just like look at my phone and then go back to bed. And I had seen that she called twice, and I called her back, and it was just like that call that you just never think is meant for you. It was like, I have to tell you something. Dad was killed in a car accident tonight. It had been a really big storm. My mom had been living in Michigan, and at the time they were still happily married, but my dad didn't move when my mom moved, so he was still living in Indianapolis. And so he would go up on the weekends, and it was like a 4-hour drive. And he was a surgeon, and so he drove back to Indianapolis that night, and it was just a really bad storm. And his car slid on the ice. There was a semi, and he died. And so I flew back to Indianapolis for 2 weeks, and I came back to Tucson on I think I started that week on Monday. And so Saturday was sort of my first day where I wasn't going to be surrounded by family, by friends, at work. It was really my first day of like dealing with this new reality kind of alone. And my phone rang. I started blowing up at like 10 a.m. I think it was 9 or 10 a.m. Shooting at the Safeway. It was just shocking. So they basically said anyone who can get there, get there. And when I got there, it was still like full ambulance, full scene. And I feel like I was at that scene for months. I mean, I don't know. I feel like we were just there, camped out for like forever. And it was a really crazy time because you're watching other people lose loved ones, and having been through what I had literally been through 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks prior, I think gave me a lot of perspective just on life. I was still so young, but these people were going through the same thing essentially, in that they'd lost someone unexpectedly and suddenly, whether it was a parent, a child, someone who was just living, in this case, they were going to an event with someone they admired, Gabby Giffords, and just lost their lives, like on the spot.
Thank you for sharing that, first of all. And also, has that impacted the way that you report on grief going forward as a journalist? I would imagine so.
Yeah, absolutely. I still have a really hard time knocking on a door after someone has died. I hate that assignment. And I think I'm at a place now in my career where I might even just say I don't want to do that. I think it's something I know we are often required to do. But I think if you make the phone call and they hang up on you, which happens, or you make the phone call and they don't answer, I believe the right thing to do is to leave a note with your phone number. I feel pretty strongly about that now. I think it's taken me a long time to get there. Now, being a journalist, and being that my dad was a surgeon in Indianapolis, it was a news story when he died. And I was eager to tell the story of who he was, as was my mother. So we did do some interviews shortly after my dad died. And I also knew people, so it wasn't like I was getting a stranger reaching out to me.
Right.
But I have come to understand that most people do not want to be talking to you on that day. They just don't. Some people do. So that's the thing. I've also talked to some families who are so eager to tell the story of a loved one who died suddenly. But I personally think unless you know them or you know someone who feels comfortable saying, "Hi, my friend is a reporter, would you like to speak with them?" I think a Facebook message, or Instagram, or leaving a note at their door, or any of that is so much more thoughtful than knock, knock, heard so-and-so passed away suddenly, can I talk to you?
That's such great advice, because it is so difficult as a journalist to navigate that.
Yeah, I'm sure you've done it too. I mean, it's the worst.
It really is. For those that want to follow in your footsteps and get to the network level, what are some skills that you think that aspiring journalists and women in journalists need to have?
Whew, okay, so this is a really good question, and I still go back to this. I think you have to love to write. I still believe, even though we're all doing this short form captions, whatever it is, I think learning and loving to write well is the most important skill. That's my personal view. I mean, there's so many other important skills. I think being able to talk to people, being comfortable on camera, which comes with time. But I think writing, because writing influences so much how you come across on air, how well you can listen to people. Because, as a writer, you know what you need to complete a story. And so that makes you a better listener, because you're going into the conversation hoping that they'll get to where you want to fill this part of your story, but also knowing that if they don't go there with you, you can adjust. And that's what being a good writer is being able to come in with a plan, being able to adjust, and being able to listen. That's my view.
That's great advice. We were talking about your time in New York earlier, raising 3 children.
Right.
3 children under 5 years
Yeah.
old, right?
At one moment, it was under 4 because my son turned 4 a few months after my third was born. But yeah, we're doing it. We're living the life.
I mean, part of me just wants to ask, how do you do it? What's your routine like? I need to know, what's a day like? Go really micro on this. A day
Yeah.
where you're working with 3 children. What time do you wake up? What do you do next? Like, I want to hear it all.
Yeah. So I went back to work, well, with all 3, but really with this third very, very early. It's funny, I say very early because I think we're all now used to getting 2 or 3 months maternity. I think that's kind of the norm now, probably. Back in the day, like the women who came to this place before us got 6 weeks if they were lucky, if
I
any.
know.
So I'm like grateful for the time. And again, because I'm freelance, I can take as long as I want. So when the first day back to work since our baby was born, because I think that's like the most intense that I've had so far. Working the morning shift, as I think a lot of women in the industry probably have realized, is actually the better shift when you have kids, because you still have an opportunity to be with them. I think about women who work, 9 to 6, and if you have a 6 o'clock live shot an hour away, you probably just miss bedtime, right? I had asked special permission to work my first 2 hours from home so I could pump, because I didn't want to have to pump multiple times at the office, pumping breast milk for those who haven't reached that point in their lives or don't plan to. But so I woke up at an hour early to do that. So, my shift at NewsPath at CBS is normally a 1 a.m. start.
Okay.
So I can wake up at like 12:30 because I do my hair and makeup there. I do my own, but I do it at work. So I woke up at like 11 so I could pump. So I brought my pump into our living room so I didn't wake up my husband, set up my pump. I'm pumping. I'm writing my story while I'm pumping, which is just such a funny thing, but that's what it is.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
what it takes. Then I Uber to work. I get to work I got there at like 2 because, again, I had gotten this special permission to be able to do that first part of my day. So for NewsPath, you write one of your stories and a producer writes the other, and then stations can pick which one they want.
Okay.
So I wrote my story from home. So then I came into work, tracked, because I can't, and again, in New York, I can't really track from home because my husband's in our room, my older 2 are in their room, the baby is in his room, which is like right sitting where I am right now. So like I could wake him up, so I can't really track here. I did try it once and it was a disaster. My husband woke up, it was a whole mess. So I go into work, I track, I do my hair and makeup. I have my very first live shot, which is at 4 a.m. And then I usually have a BBC hit within the first half hour. So that first, from 4 to 6, you're pretty jam-packed with live shots. Then I had to pump again. So I pumped. I'm like walking past my coworkers with my lunchbox that they probably think has my lunch in it, but no, it's got breast milk in it, and putting it in the fridge, trying not to forget it on the way home because I've also made that mistake. And then at the end of my shift, which is around like 9:30, 10, I went home. The baby is still sleeping, so we still have help right now. And so the baby was with our nanny, and he was sleeping, so I had to pump again because I can't sleep if I don't pump because your breasts start to fill and feel uncomfortable. Take whatever kind of nap I can get. And then by then, my daughter was home from her school day, which is only a half day, so I hung out with her for a little bit. Second nap, dinner with my older one, spend some time with him, and then my husband has to do bedtime because I have to go back to bed for work the next day. So
What
that's
time do you
why-
usually get to sleep?
Gosh, I'm more of a 3 short nap person because this overnight shift isn't like the local ones I did where you can come in at like 2 or 3. I have to be there at 1.
Right.
Or up at midnight or up at 11 if I'm going to pump. So I try to fall asleep by like 8. So I would say I'm doing like 2 or 3 2 to 3 hour naps. It's kind of,
Wow.
yeah.
Your
In this-
body just in chaos, like all the time?
Truly, truly. And, you know, my husband and I, we do live a New York life. I mean, we go out to dinner with other couples a lot. It's important for us to have that time. And so, yeah, it's just, you're kind of all out of sorts. Like this week I worked Monday and Tuesday. And then yesterday I took a 3-hour nap in the middle of the day, even though I'd slept a full night the night before, because I'm still, you know, I missed like 2-3 full nights of sleep this week. So yeah, you're just a mess. The morning show is always like that though. You know that. It's like
Oh, yeah. It is. That's
three
for sure.
shots. I don't remember names. I don't remember where I went the day before. Like it's just like free for all.
So speaking of your children, you have 3 children under 5, and many would assume that you were able to get pregnant quickly and very easily, but we were talking off camera about IVF, and you mentioned that you had done IVF. Can you explain that process and what that was like for you? Because I know it is largely not talked about.
Yeah. Okay. So IVF is very hard. We did it for genetic reasons. I actually, again, I think I mentioned, I met my husband I was 31. In my late 20s, early 30s, I had a breakup that scared me on a lot of levels, but mostly because I was worried about starting over at that age and being able to have children. So I froze my eggs before I met my husband. My mom suggested it. She offered graciously to pay for it because in news, as you know, you don't make that much. And it definitely was not covered at the time. It might be now, but it wasn't. This was like 7 years ago. So I froze my eggs. And then I met my husband like 3 months later. It was like this crazy twist. I froze my eggs in May, met my husband in August. It was
Of course, because that's
right?
how
It
it
was
had
like,
to
I
happen.
needed it. Yeah, exactly. I was like, thanks, Mom. Of course, you're always right. Like, they're always right? Mom's always right somehow. And then when we started talking about having children, because I carry a gene that makes me like 90% likelihood over my lifetime to have breast cancer. Through IVF, you are able to, once you've made an embryo, to test the embryo for that gene. So we decided to use, instead of trying naturally, we decided to use my frozen eggs to have children. So in the beginning, my first 2 pregnancies, challenging because IVF is just hard. It's like the shots and the timing and the hormones, and you feel crazy and it's expensive, and you're waiting to find out how many eggs, how many embryos, how many are viable. In my case, how many were genetically appropriate to use. Now, again, I carry this gene. I have a normal, happy life, but I don't want my children to carry it because it is just like I have this over my shoulder thought of like, when am I going to get this cancer? And I'm probably going to end up having surgery so I don't get it. But I didn't want my kids to have to worry about it. So we had 2 that worked. And both of my older children are from IVF with the eggs that I froze before I met my husband. So when we went to have my 3rd, we still had some embryos. And I just thought, great, like this IVF thing works for me. I already did the hard work of the freezing. And we struck out 3 times in a row. We had a failed transfer, which just basically means they put an embryo in and it didn't take. and which was very difficult for us because we thought, oh, we're good. Like we don't have this fertility thing. We just have this genetic thing. But then it turned into, no, we've got the genetic thing and the fertility thing. So we tried again. And then I had a miscarriage, which it was a very early miscarriage. And I am fortunate compared to many of the stories I've heard that it was so early. We didn't even have a heartbeat yet. But it was still like I had already started celebrating this third child to be in my mind. I'd started planning our lives. I started planning out the bedroom configuration because we don't have a bedroom for everyone in our apartment. And so it was like this whole like, wow, okay, so this isn't going to be as easy. And then we did another embryo transfer, which I had to do another retrieval for, egg retrieval. So we had to make more embryos. And that one failed again. And at that
I don't
point,
think that's talked enough about, because once you get to that transfer stage, the transfers can then fail, and a woman can just start to feel defeated, honestly.
really defeated. I mean, 3 in a row. When I had this whole timeline, because we'd had such success early on through IVF, I just had this timeline that like, okay, well then we're going to get pregnant again, then we're going to have a third, and then we're going to be done, or maybe not. We might not be done. We'll see. But like you said, I mean, 3 failed attempts in a row is just like really, really devastating. And it does feel, I think, different. Again, I've never tried naturally, so I'm not sure. But with IVF, like everything is so controlled that you almost feel like you have control. You do not have control. And all it takes is like one failed transfer or our miscarriage or our second failed transfer to realize that you're really not in control. No amount of medicine, shots, money, different doctors, the right embryo, the most healthy embryo, because we had a very healthy embryo that didn't work out. And so I think it's important for people to know that IVF is not 100%. That said, if you are struggling or if you want children, I still recommend to young women to freeze your eggs. I have 2 children from frozen eggs. And again, even freezing your eggs is not, it's not really an insurance policy. It happened to work for me. But I think if you are, whether in a relationship or not, and you think you want children and you think it's going to be after your early 30s, I think you got to freeze your eggs. I mean, it worked for me. I'm very lucky. But I think people wait too long. And by the time they go to do it, it is too late.
And how did you find out that you were at high risk for breast cancer and you had that gene? Did you do genetic testing?
So my grandmother, my dad's mother, who I never met, died of breast cancer very young. Because I just never met her. She was like in her early 50s when she died. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in her late 40s, which is fairly young. And now it seems not to be, but at the time it was like on the younger end. And so my dad tested himself for this gene. He carried the gene, and so my 3 siblings, we all got tested for it. I wanted my results right away. I was 19. I wanted my results like that day. So I knew as young as 19 that I had this predisposition for breast and ovarian cancer. The ovarian cancer risk is lower. It's like 40 to 50%, but ovarian cancer is a much more, it's a deadlier cancer. It's less detectable. It's scarier to me, and it's just a scarier cancer. So I have a very high risk of that too. And so, at some point I'm going to have a double mastectomy and I will have my ovaries removed because I want to be here for my kids as long as I can. And that's my number one goal.
I'm glad you shared that, because I have Lynch syndrome, which puts me at a high risk for colon cancer, uterine cancer, those kind of cancers. And by doing that genetic testing, I at least know, and I can try to do all the things that I can do to prevent it. And I think the message is that if you can, to do the genetic testing so that you are aware and so you can be prepared do the prevention things, get the colonoscopies every 2 years like I have to do, even though I hate doing it, just so that you can be at the front end of it.
I totally agree. Like for me, knowledge is power. I knew I had this family history. So it would have been just weighing over my head, like, do I have this gene or not if I hadn't done the testing? And having the testing, like you said, I now know how often I should be screened. And every time, I mean, it doesn't mean you're totally free, but every time you have the screening, it's a little bit of the burden lifted. It's like, okay, I'm good for a little while. Next screening will know more information. And to me, knowledge is power. I respect those who don't want the information. I understand not wanting to like live with that fear, but I actually fear less because I fear less now because I have all the information. I know how I can hopefully detect it. I'm in with the right physicians. I'm doing what I can to prevent it in my daily life.
Yeah,
And
knowledge is power, and hopefully you can prevent things early by knowing this information.
and in our case, we also are preventing our children from carrying the gene. Not everyone does that, and I don't know that everyone should, but we, since we had the eggs, decided to.
You mentioned that you are Jewish, and I wanted to know, how does your Jewish faith impact you as a journalist, especially among the recent years of anti-Semitism?
It's a really good question. I have to say it has been, as a journalist and as a human being and as a Jewish person, it has been one of the most, I guess now year and a half, it's been one of the most challenging periods of my entire life. In some ways, I've realized the people who are really there for me, and that has been really rewarding and reaffirming. I've also, some friendships have changed over the last year and a half for me, and that has been a shock to me. I wouldn't say necessarily because people are anti-Semitic in who they are. I think people are fearful of speaking up for Jewish people. I think they worry it will get them in trouble in terms of the war in some way, that people might think they support things that they don't personally. And so I think people are afraid to reach out to Jewish people to be like, I am here for you, or even to stand up publicly and make a post that's like, I have Jewish friends and I think the anti-Semitism is just awful. People are scared to do that right now. And to me, that has been the most, I think, hurtful part than the direct anti-Semitism, because I don't actually feel personally so much anti-Semitism. I see it. I know friends who've experienced it. I felt it on rare occasions over the years. But it's more of people not feeling the courage to stick up for me as a friend. And so I've really found myself as a journalist leaning on a lot of other Jewish journalists during this time. It is very hard. I have family in the Middle East. I speak to them often. We named our son Hirsch after my grandfather, whose last name was Hirsch. He was a rabbi and he lived in Jerusalem for a very long time, and he's buried there. And the last time I was in Israel, which I've been to many times, I was at his grave. So it is very hard for me not to feel connected to this story. And I think as a journalist, I think what I've realized and learned is you're allowed to feel something. You are allowed to feel something. It is still your responsibility to tell both sides of the story and to tell them accurately. But that does not mean you cannot have compassion. You just need to have that compassion for everyone equally.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. Before I let you go, you've been featured on CBS News. You work for CBS News Path. For those journalists that want to step in your shoes and get to the network level, what piece of advice would you give them?
I think I would say for someone who really wants to work at the network, don't give up. Because now, in this modern era, You can do it. I think things have changed so much that young journalists have the opportunity to work in these big jobs. You just have to be willing to put in the work, to say yes, and to put yourself out there. Email the person who you think might ignore you. Follow up. Don't be annoying, but follow up. Reach every contact you have. And if you're the good person, which I know so many people listening are, someone's going to want to return the favor. They're going to say, I remember that girl. I worked with her in, Topeka, and now I'm at the network and I want to help her out. So I would say, use your contacts, don't give up, and push for what you deserve.
Push for what you deserve. Amen to that. All right, let's get to rapid fire. Fill in the blank. If I weren't a journalist, I would be
a doctor. I kind of was always interested in medicine because I grew up in a family with doctors, but as a mother now and having been through childbirth, I'm just in awe of these doctors, and I think, what a cool job.
Amazing. Your coffee order?
Soy chai.
Oh, I love chai too.
The best.
Your favorite travel destination?
I'm gonna go with Mexico.
What part of Mexico?
So there's an area called Mayacoba. It's like a bunch of different hotels in one little area. It's like 20 miles outside of Cancun. It's just the dream. It's awesome.
Something people often get wrong about you?
How to pronounce my name. My first name is Naomi, like neigh like a horse. My last name is Ruchim, like Ruckham, like Stuckham. I don't ever know how to tell people how to say it. People always mispronounce it. And even my maiden name, which was Peskovitz, people always mispronounce too. So it'd be like Naomi Ruchim. And then also what we talked about earlier, that I'm a bit of an introvert. I think people think I'm not, but I do have that introverted piece of me.
I watched an interview earlier today to make sure that I had the pronunciation of your name correct, and I still said Naomi at the beginning of this interview, so apologies.
I didn't notice, so you're good. I literally didn't even notice.
I was more paying attention to the last name to defend myself. The last movie, TV show, or book you watched and loved?
Well, I don't want to be basic and say White Lotus, because who hasn't watched White Lotus? Did you watch White Lotus?
Piper, no, I did not. Of course I did. Of course.
Yes, so good. So I'm going to go my less basic, which maybe it's basic too. Last of Us. Are you watching Last of Us?
I am not, but I know I'm very familiar. Love it.
Oh, I love it. And I am not really into sci-fi, but the storyline is just so good. I'm in tears, and it's so beautifully shot. Every episode's like a movie. The acting is amazing. It's a great cast. It's just a really awesome show.
I've heard good things. A snapshot of an ordinary everyday moment that gives you true joy.
School pickup. The running towards you, it's like whichever kid it is. My baby doesn't run, obviously, but the older two. Picking up Max from school. It's like a puppy. I always compare him to a puppy. He's like, I'm like so excited to see you, mommy. And you're just like, yay, I love you too. That's just my favorite part of the day.
I love that. If you could switch lives with one person for a day, who would it be?
I had a different answer, and then I just thought of a new one. My husband. It would be my husband.
What? I need to hear this.
So we're different and similar. We're more different, actually, than similar, which has been like a part of marriage I wasn't expecting. He just has such a stable, calming approach to any problem. He tries to explain to me how he views issues, like conflict or an obstacle. And I think I just need to be in his shoes for a day to get in his real mindset. He's just he's the best person I've ever known, by far. I'm the luckiest woman in the world. I firmly believe that. I love him so much, and I'm so lucky to have him. He somehow has managed to balance it all in his life in a way that, without the stress. I try to balance it all, but I feel these moments of stress. he's just such a calm person. I think I would just really learn from like even just one day of like how he manages conflict. And he's just the best dad, and he has so much more patience than I do, and I want that. I want to be patient like him.
Gosh, that's such a good answer. One thing you're deeply grateful for right now?
3 healthy children. I don't know how many times a day I think about if everything else disappeared, I have 3 healthy children. And I am so grateful for their health. And I'm not always what I want to be as a mother, but I'm trying, and they are teaching me so much.
Absolutely. Your favorite restaurant? I want to know this one.
Okay, it's a New York restaurant. We are foodies, like big time foodies in my family.
Oh, good. I am too. So I want to hear. Give me a couple, actually.
Okay, I could give you like a million, but I won't waste your time. But my very favorite restaurant right now is a place called Fort Charles Prime Rib. It is a steakhouse with it focuses on prime rib, but like all the sides. So like I love a steakhouse actually mostly for the sides and like the Caesar salad and like the shrimp cocktail. And
Of course.
It has the best. And like I don't love burgers, but everyone loves their burger. They have like the best cream spinach, amazing mashed potatoes. Like it's just, and it's this really cool, like quiet downstairs, like kind of bar situation with like an amazing martini. It's just the best.
I love a martini too. You have me hooked when I go to New York.
Dirty martini. That's my drink. It's so good. And then my second right now in the city is a place called Teresi, which is, if you've heard of Carbone, it's related to the Carbone group. It's an Italian place. Everything I've ever tried there is like out of this world amazing. It's just the best. I'll give you one more because it's a different one. It's called Kazunori. Have you been to Sugarfish?
Yes. Oh, gosh, have I been to Sugarfish? I think that's like a weekly staple in this household.
Right? You know they have the best hand rolls. Like,
oh my God, so good.
the hand rolls. So in New York, I don't know if they have one by you guys, but in New York they have a place called Kazunori. It's just the hand rolls. So you like sit at a bar, kind of like Sugarfish if you go like, you know, with just one person, and you basically just write down on the sheet like which hand rolls you want, and you eat them like they give you one by one. It's almost like omakase, but just hand rolls. It's totally reasonable, like pricing wise. It's no reservations, like quick in and out lunch. It can be a wait, but like it goes fast because people don't sit for long. It's the best. If you come to New York, that's probably my number one place I'd recommend because no reservations.
Good to know. If you could go back in time to when you first started your career, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
Okay. I did not write down my overtime for a long time because I did not understand how overtime worked. And I remember one of my photographers who I was working with was like, well, at least you got a lot of overtime this week, because I was like, oh, it's such a long day. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you don't write down your overtime? I'm like, well, I have a salary. And he's like, no, girl, you have to write down those extra hours or else they will not tell you about them. And once I started doing that, I realized I could afford a few more things in my life. Oh, and in addition to that, take your vacation days, friends. Take your vacation days. You are getting paid for them. You're not going to get an extra cookie or sticker if you don't take them. You are owed your vacation.
Thank you. Talk about that.
Right? Because I think as young journalists, we're taught just like never say no, work, work, work.
Yes.
But you're still owed your vacation. Put it in. You might not get Christmas or Thanksgiving off your first year somewhere, but like you should get it your second or third, in my opinion. You got to take those days because I don't know how many of those I just let die in a hole of payment that I deserve and never got.
Exactly. Well, Naomi, and I got your name right this time.
I didn't hear it the first time, so you're good.
This was amazing. Where can people find you if they want to follow you?
I mostly am on Instagram these days. I don't do X much or Facebook. The tricky thing is, though, Instagram doesn't let you, if you're verified, it doesn't let you change your name. So my name is Naomi Ruchim on Instagram, but my handle is Naomi Peskovitz, which is my maiden name.